Is it? I'll take a 2.5%er.
Can we get another damp? Thanks. It's actually 2.35. 70 calories per 12 ounce, 5 grams of carbs.
Nice.
We had her tested because we're going to take her to market. Yep.
I listened to, I had Imperial Beverage messaged me off of one of my videos I did where I was talking about coming down here to sit and chat with you, and they're like, oh yeah, great conversationalist. We actually did a podcast with them, or an interview.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, well, where is it? So they sent me the link and gave it a listen. I listened to the whole thing.
I haven't.
This episode is brought to you by Brandon Ball, broker-owner of Dwelling Realty, Keller Williams, Northern Michigan. Are you looking to sell your home? Then look no further. When you list your home with Brandon Ball, you'll get a trusted advisor who will guide you through the entire selling process. With extensive knowledge of the local market, he'll help price your home competitively to attract the right buyers. And with proven marketed strategies, your home will be seen by the most qualified of buyers. With 17 years in the business, you'll have someone experienced who's on your side. Contact Brandon today to get started selling your home. 231-690-4981. That's 231-690-4981. Or Brandon at dwellingrealty.com.
Yeah, it was actually really good because, you know, my focus today, really, I want to talk about your running journey, you know, and working your way to the ultras. So for anybody who's listening or watching, I'll put the link to that interview that Michael did with Imperial Beverage. I think it's called Another Round. Is their name of their Imperial Beverage, Another Round, or something like that? If I get it wrong, I'm sorry, but I'll put it in the show notes. I'll put the link to that in the show notes so that you can hear really kind of the history about Michael's journey into the brewing business and where that came from. I mean, because I was really super interested in maybe learning about the 400 years of your family being in the liquor business, but you did a really good job on that podcast kind of explaining. I know that there's probably a multitude of stories within that because I read your bio on, you know, I tend to do a little bit of stalking before an interview.
Makes sense.
And when you talk, I think it was on LinkedIn, in your LinkedIn bio, where you talked about all the years. There's some moonshining and stuff like that, and speakeasies, and I'm sure that there's a lot of interesting stuff there.
Fun family history.
Yeah, but hey, cheers.
Cheers.
2%er, huh?
2.35 on this batch. I'm hoping to get it right to 2.45. Light,
that does not
easy.
taste like a 2 point.
You know,
It's light and crisp. Boy, if NA beers could taste like that.
I fell in love with low alcohol beer when I was out in Arizona. Actually, I had my first one the day that COVID came to Phoenix. I was in Phoenix, and especially with my lifestyle, with running all the time. I used to put NAs in my cooler. Well, sometimes in the summer I still will. I'll throw an NA beer in the cooler so I can get back to my car for a break, throw a little bit of beer back, and then get back out there. And I had my first small beer or low alc beer. I went, I could do that with this. That would be
delightful.
great.
You got that canned, or is this?
Coming soon. Stay tuned.
I might have to take some to go.
Yeah, I had 8 of these at our anniversary party.
Why wouldn't you?
And got up the next morning and ran 20 miles.
That's one shifting sands almost.
Exactly.
You know, what is that, 7%?
Yeah.
So that's my favorite Pigeon Hill beer.
Me too.
I love that beer. But let's get into the nuts and bolts. So, actually, my wife Betsy. So first of all, let me foreshadow this. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast because this has been a conversation I've been wanting to have. I have a list of people that I want to interview, and you were on that list. So, thank you for accepting.
I appreciate it. This is the first time anyone's asked me to sit down and talk about running on a podcast, so I was excited.
Well, it's something I'm super passionate about. I'm not anywhere near the distance level that you're at, although it's an aspiration of mine, and we'll kind of touch on that a little bit. I think about 8 years older than you, so...
Your peak ultra running age.
Yeah, that's what they say, Rich Roll style, you know?
Yeah.
When I put you on the list, Betsy was like, she went and did her own kind of reading. Maybe about a month after the Margie, you posted like a recap, but there was
Yeah.
more story in there too. And she said, I'd really be interested to know the journey to that point. And I too, with when did running become a part of your life? Why did you start running? From my personal experiences with running, I never ran. I mean, I was athletic in high school, then I kind of fell off the athletic wagon right after high school. Went through a stage where I was, I don't know, I guess you could say, trying to figure out what I want to do with my life. Got into the service, forced running on you. Got out of the service and kind of back into the old habits, and that's when I got into the beer business. And I didn't start running until probably 12 years ago. So that would have put me at about 32 years old, 33 years old. And it was a slow process. Like back then, even that long ago, there's no Garmin watches. I mean, if they were, I certainly wasn't wearing one, so I didn't know my distances. I didn't know how fast or how slow I was running, how good I was getting at. And then it just kind of slowly started getting into the 5K circuit. But I'll finish that little history about myself. But it changed my life because it really moved me into a focusing on my health more than anything was the running. I'd always kind of been a little bit of a gym guy and recently got more into gym, but running has always been a staple, and I've gradually increased from the 5Ks up through marathon, and trail running is a passion, which I know it is of yours, so I can't wait to talk about that. So enough about me. How did you start and why?
Like you, I was in some sports in high school, and running was always a punishment. I think about wrestling in high school. It wasn't a punishment per se, but it felt like it. I mean, I remember puking while running in high school, and it was celebrated. I was like, man, this is terrible. Who would do this for fun?
Right.
And so once I got to college, I became very sedentary, no working out at all. Put on a lot of weight.
Same.
I
think I gained. My freshman 15 was more like a freshman 40.
I went from about 135 to over 200.
That's
I
a
gained
big jump,
lot of
dog.
weight. I gained a lot of weight. And pretty much stayed that way until graduating college. I started walking a lot more and managed to lose a bit of weight. Went to law school. Stress took all that weight off, as well as walking over a mile a day and commuting. And then we came back to Muskegon after I graduated. And Alana, my wife, has always been a runner, at least as long as I've known her. And she started a local running club, Run Muskegon, on Craigslist of all places. It was one person, two people showing up for a while. When Pigeon Hill opened up, the running group started meeting at Pigeon Hill and became pretty popular overnight. So I would go on Wednesday nights and I would hold the table. I'd sit there, I'd drink a beer, they'd go run. I'd sit there, enjoy my beer, hold the table. They'd get back, I'd have another beer, and I was lawyering, working at Pigeon Hill full time. And my life was just very sedentary, and it added up quickly. Started gaining that weight back, and constantly having back pain. I do have a bad back, and knee pain. And one day Alana looked at me and she said, "You don't have to run, but you have to do something."
Yeah.
And I said, "Well, buy me a pair of running shoes, teach me how to run." And she bought me a pair of running shoes and helped me train for my first 5K, which was the Seaway Run 5K. And at that point, I still hated it. It wasn't something I was doing for enjoyment. It was something I was doing because I needed to lose weight. Around the same time, my doctor told me I had high blood pressure. And so I started running a little more seriously, thinking about what I was eating. And shortly, sometime probably that same summer, Rhino, who's one of our brewers, sent me a link to a Netflix documentary. And he was also a runner, or he is a runner. And Rhino sends me this link to a documentary called The Race That Eats Its Young, the Barkley Marathons.
Yeah.
And I remember I remember responding to the link he sent me saying, you go running and then you watch movies about running. That's stupid.
I do that.
I do too now. But it took a couple of weeks. Finally, I sat down and I watched the documentary, and I said to him, "These people are morons. I would never do anything like that." About 2 weeks later, I texted him, or maybe I told him at work. I said, "I'm going to run that race," and that was what lit the fire. The whole idea, taking running from casual runner to really discovering who and what you are, and what you're made of, which is the underlying concept of the Barkley Marathons. Once that switch flipped, I became pretty serious about running, and somewhere along the way, started to actually enjoy it.
What do you enjoy more? I like this. I struggle with this question a little bit, but for myself, is it the training or the actual race itself? Because I will say that once I get to the race and it's finished, and then there's always like, am I going to sign up again?
Yeah.
Am I going to do this again? And then eventually I do, and I think the reason why I say I'm going to do the next one or the bigger one is because of how much I really enjoyed the process of getting to it.
Right. I think for me it's probably twofold. I really enjoy maintenance mileage, year round. And then I enjoy a lot of the ramp up, but by the time I'm maybe 6 weeks out from a race, I'm not enjoying training quite as much. That's when it becomes a bit more grueling. And then the race comes, and that's kind of the pinnacle. So maybe a mix of both.
So when did you decide to take the leap from a marathon to an ultra? And what was your first ultra? Was it 50 miles?
50K.
Was it 50K?
The Barkley Fall Classic down in basically Wartburg, Tennessee. I went from 5K to the following summer half marathon. Didn't actually run a 10K for a few years. After I ran my first 5K, I told Alana, I'll do more of these, but if I ever run a 10K, you can make me wear nipple tassels. Because I'm never going that far. So I intentionally avoided doing that distance for a while because I didn't want to have to wear tassels. So I went up to a half marathon, and I think I had done, I'd probably run 3 half marathons when I decided to run a 50K, maybe 4. And so the first time I ran a marathon was training for my first 50K.
That's super interesting.
And from there, from the 50K, let's see.
What was the 50K?
The Barkley Fall Classic.
That's right.
Yeah. Took me, I believe it was 13 hours, 12 minutes, and a couple of seconds. It was a 13-hour, 20-minute cutoff. But I got it done. And I ran that same 50K the following year, then ran a 50-miler just for fun around Muskegon. That was during COVID. I was trained, and I wonder if I can run 50 miles. So I did, and then kind of skipped over 100-milers, and my next big race was about 330. And that was...
What race was that?
the last annual Heart of the South.
330 miles? I didn't see that on your...
So...
Let me just tell a quick story about Michael real quick before we get to this 330 mile. I definitely want to talk about that now that that's coming to light, but also the Margie. Pre-COVID, I think it was pre-COVID. It was either the year before COVID or the year after everything kind of... Anyways, it was the North Country Trail. When I ran into you there.
Yeah.
I was doing the first wave half. I think you were doing the second.
I think so.
And you were running it with your wife.
Yep.
So that was my first, like, oh, Michael's here. I knew you were a runner.
Yep.
I didn't know how into it you were. And that year was my first year running a half marathon. And I did the North Country Trail. My brother and sister-in-law
Good first one.
are really good athletes. They run in it every year. And they were like, oh, you could totally do it. And I'm like, I don't know if I can, but I'm gonna train for it and do it. So anyways, the story is I run into Michael at the start line of the first wave, and I'm like, oh, hey, how's it going? Oh my, good to see you. We just exchanged pleasantries. I don't know if you remember this.
Yeah.
But I don't know if you remember seeing me in the woods. So the second wave starts I don't know how long after, but there was a point where I'm just struggle busing up the side of a hill on the North Country, and I hear right behind you, and it was you and your wife. You were running together, and you flew past me, and I don't know if you saw me or not, but then you started doing like this, like funny, like I'm having just a great time. You're just kind of gallivanting through the woods, and I'm like, son of a bitch, you know. It's something to aspire to, but I'm like, holy Christ, wow, and you just blew through it. I know that there are people that just kind of blow through the thing, but that was a moment where I was like, this guy's really good, and he's dialed.
I think it's more that I just kind of let loose.
When
I'll
you
be
were-
out singing show tunes in the middle of a race.
When you went past me, I'm like, he's definitely just, this is the tune-up for something else.
I don't think that was the year I did both, because I did the full and the half one year. But I don't think it was that year. It must have been the next year. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a crazy group of people too.
Oh,
I've got
yes.
friends that do that. They'll do the half on Saturday and the full on.
It's a great race.
Yeah, Chris does a really good job with that. A really, really good job with that. Hard guy to get a hold of because I've been wanting to talk to him. But yeah. Anyhow, there's that story. Tell me about this 330. You jumped right into this. You skipped the 100 and went to a 336-mile race.
Yeah. During COVID, I started running a lot more road. Not really my jam for the most part, but I started running more road and started using it as a way to explore. You know, I would just kind of go out for a long run and see where it took me. And go to parts of town that parts of the county I'd never been to. And during that period, I heard about this race. It was the first year in 2020 called the Last Annual Heart of the South. And the whole idea was, it's a Laz race, so the same guy who's behind Barkley. He had a problem with ultra sign up, and too many people got into his other 500K,
Okay.
which is called Vol State.
Yep.
So he created this new race to accommodate the people who couldn't get in or who had gotten in and couldn't actually be allowed to run, called the Last Annual Heart of the South. And it is a race with no set start point, or at least an unannounced start point.
Yeah. Okay. I'm familiar now.
They throw you
Yeah.
on a bus at the finish line where you park, drive you 10 hours on said bus, and then say, good luck. No aid, no crew. Here's a map. This is the way to get back. Have fun. And the first year I didn't run it, but in 21 I looked at it and I said, that sounds just like a life-changing experience. I want to try that. And I also thought it might be a good way to build up my running resume because I wanted to run the Barkley Marathons. And so I signed up. And I'll tell you what, it was a life-altering experience. I've since ran it again. That was 350 miles the last time I ran it. But you rely on nobody but yourself. You sleep behind Dollar Generals. You sleep in parking lots. Slept at quite a few Baptist churches. Slept in the bathroom of a gas station. You really learn what it means to rely on yourself and your wits, and also your cell phone and Google Maps.
How do you prep for that?
You run a lot. Walk.
Yeah.
My preparations, in terms of training, I ran to City Built one time, which is the route I took was about 40 miles, and I would set a run-walk timer on my watch. So I would run for 8 minutes, walk for 2, run at an easy pace, 8 minutes, walk for 2, just to continuously change the muscle groups that are being used to help avoid fatigue. I also ran to Mitten Brewing in Saugatuck one time, which was about 100K. And then during the process of that, started learning how to rely on gas stations for fuel, because you have to get water, you can't carry it all, you have to get food. So I'd start out with enough fuel and enough water to get me 5-10 miles. And then would rely on these locations I'd mapped out along the way. Training my stomach. Because
That's a real thing.
I'm eating donuts as I run. I think I did one 50-miler exclusively on donuts. Just learning what you actually need, and then from a gear perspective, once you're out there long enough, you realize, okay, this this is not the right thing to wear.
Sure.
I wish I had this on me. And you start compiling lists. I'm very list oriented, very type A. So after every training run, write down notes, what worked, what didn't, and try to learn from that. And then basically throw it all out the window as soon as you start.
So when you're in a race like that, mentally, you've got to be in the top, like the smallest percentage in the world mentally to be able to not give in to the voices in your head telling you just stop. Your knees hurt. Your back hurts. Your head hurts. Your shoulders hurt. Everything hurts. You're puking.
Razor blades. Your feet feel like there are razor blades under them.
What do you do to continue to finish?
You just shut it down. Courtney DeWalter.
I was going to bring
really
her up.
admire. She talks about her pain cave, and it's not an analogy that I normally use. Just I visualize it a little bit differently. But for me, maybe the Book of Mormon. You turn it off like a light switch, because that at the end of the day is what you do. You just stuff it into a box and keep moving forward. So every time, after about, 150, 200 miles, it feels like you're running on razor blades because your feet are just bruised and battered, even if they're not overly blistered. And in my case, the first race, my feet looked like raw hamburger. I didn't know foot care the first time I did HOTS. And so I was actually concerned about infection. I'm bleeding through my socks, my feet are mangled. And I thought I would have to drop as a result of infection. Luckily, I didn't. I got it under control. But every time you stop, you stand back up, excruciating pain. And then somehow, as long as you can get through that first mile or so, it's almost like your mind adjusts to the pain and just kind of puts it aside. Think of like background music. Eventually you stop noticing that music playing in the background.
Right.
Eventually you stop feeling that pain, at least to the same level.
Have you ever quit a race because of injury or pain or?
Trying to think. I had to drop out of. I've done a few backyards. The Ode to Last series.
Wild. Love it.
Yeah. The Ode to Last series on the east side. Pigeon Hill sends beer. We sponsor the race itself, and that format is one that I'm just not exceptional at. That's one where mentally I do break down because I just get too bored.
Sure.
The people who
I can
do
understand
it,
that.
a buddy of mine, Piotr, won Big's Backyard Ultra a couple of years ago, and
I watch it. The stories on Instagram where he just continually updates and just keeps going and going. I just can't stop watching it.
I've talked to Piotr about it. Like, how do you just keep going? And the same way that I can shut down the pain, they can shut down the boredom. I just haven't figured out how yet. And they're shutting down the pain too. So that race, I have twice had to drop. Trying to think. The first time, actually no, it was only I DNF'd every single one because only one person finishes.
Right.
But I'm trying to think. I ended up in a porta-john about halfway through a loop, and 4.167 miles. You've got an hour to do it. Very easy in theory. But about halfway through a loop, I ended up in a porta-john, both ends, emptied out, and it was like 85 degrees. And I knew there's no way I can get enough fluid in me and finish this loop under time. So I just called it. That's the only instance I can actually think of. I DNF'd Barkley, but that was an injury. It was just getting lost.
I have a friend of mine who said to me once, we typically would meet like in a coffee shop. I just see him in the local coffee shop in Manistee, and had just finished a run, popped in to get a cup of coffee, and he laughed at me. Ironically enough, he's a lawyer friend of mine, and he said, "What are you running from?" And what he meant was like, "What are you running from? Mm-hmm. You're not running. You're not being chased. What are you running from?" And I think about that sometimes because all of the people that I look to for like inspiration in this kind of world of ultra endurance running, they all, I wouldn't say all, but a lot of them do have something that they're running from. And like Rich Roll, for example, he got into it, as a way to escape his alcoholism. There are people that had drug addictions that got away from those, and their addiction is now running. I'm neither of those two, although there's something that is just driving me for more. Like I said, when I went from I ran 10Ks. Okay, so I went from the 5s to the 10s, then a half. And my first marathon was the North Country. I wasn't going to run any other marathon until I did the same thing there that I did in my previous with the half. And, I'm going to do the Ironman up in Frankfurt in 25. I'm terrified. Only because of the swim.
Yep.
I know I can do the 13 miles. I know I can do the bike ride because I do both of those things anyways. But the swim is going to be something that I've started to train for it now. But there's just something in me that just doesn't want to turn off when it comes to that stuff. And it only really started when I started running. And it's like people I admire, no, I'm not just saying that. I mean, I do admire you, and I look at people like yourself and say, man, I know I can do more. It's just getting myself in the mindset. You got to sign up for it, is what you got to do. The first thing is you got to commit to it. You got to have skin in the game, and you got to do it. But I mean, I guess so. You're very, obviously, like you just said it, you're very type A. You have so much stuff going on, and I'm not going to say that we kind of mirror in that because I've slowed down considerably in what I'm doing. I'm more focused on this and my racing company and doing the races. But they're very small in that, the racing company doesn't take a whole lot of effort,
right,
to put on a couple of races. It's really just in a few weeks' time that you got to build everything to get it going. And then this is we just pop up an iPhone and we sit and talk and I upload it on YouTube or Spotify or whatever. So it's pretty simple. I guess what I'm getting at is you own a law firm. You own a brewery. I don't know how big your team is, but it's not just the lounge. It's not just the brewing aspect of it. You also kind of have to manage the outside sales teams from your distributors, and you've got 2 distributors.
4 now.
4 now. So there's a whole culture of because you're the head marketing guy. I mean, you're the one that was boots on the ground from the beginning.
Yep.
So, and you're married. Do you have children?
No.
And you're married. And, so you definitely have a ride or die, for sure. And I do too. I mean, I couldn't do what I do without Betsy. And she is right there with me. I mean, she's not into the running as much as I am, but she's definitely something that's very, focused on health. And she's got a career. And she kind of helps me do what I do. Because without her, I wouldn't be able to do it. But how do you find the time to run 100 miles in training, run a brewery, and a law firm?
Well, part of it, no kids. A very understanding wife. Alana's training for her first 100K now, and so we're able. I think the last 2 weeks, most of the time that we've spent together has been running together, just because we're so busy at work. Beyond that, though, it's when I started to really ramp up my training the first time around. I realized that I needed to make the time, just like you do for everything else. And so, calendar. I live and die by my calendar. I got
runs. Jesse Itzler's big ass calendar.
What's that?
Jesse Itzler, his big ass calendar.
I don't know it.
You don't know who Jesse Itzler is?
No.
Oh, I'm totally gonna derail this real quick, but I'll send you his Instagram. He owns the Atlanta Hawks. He's an entrepreneur. He's an ultra runner. He owns All Day Running Company.
Oh yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
So he does this thing where it's a big ass calendar and it's as big as this window and it's got tabs. So I got one and I use it. It's more for these are the things that we're going to focus on for the year. And even if it's just like birthdays, Christmas, whatever, race.
Yep.
You know, it's really. Anyways, so sorry to derail.
No,
So
but that's really what it is. You have to find a way to make the time, and you have to really utilize your time well. So, for me, my training calendar is on my calendar, my shared calendar, so everyone can see it. And, everyone's really respectful of that. There are plenty of times where I have to move something around. And just efficient use of time. So like right now, I'm wearing my base layers. I texted you that earlier.
Yeah.
I've got my base layers on so that if my day runs long, all of my clothes for running are up in my office. I can change and go directly to the trails. During the summer, if I've got a block of time in the middle of the day that isn't booked up, and I know that it's a little more flexible, I'll show up to work in running clothes, leave, come back, and hope that no one smells me. So I think that's really the biggest thing is time management, because for me, no other hobbies. I know exactly how much time I need to and can devote to running, and I just block it off and allocate it. If I had kids or other hobbies, I think it would be a lot more difficult. I really applaud the folks who have a bunch of kids running around at home and still manage to pull it off.
Well, I think that it's having a good partner. Like Trent's 21, just turned 21, and I have his younger sister is 19.
Yep.
But Betsy and I have an 8-year-old or 9-year-old. She just turned 9. Mary just turned 9, and so when we were both training for like a half marathon, it was like, okay, so I'm gonna go at 5 in the morning, or you're gonna go at 5, and I'll stay home and back and forth, but and she'll do stuff after work, before work, so I get it. And when we were running the liquor store, it's funny because one of your partners is a CPA, Betsy's a CPA. So when I heard that on the podcast that you did with Imperial, I was like, so all this, what, quick little sidebar, what a nut to have for a business owner. You're a lawyer, you have a CPA, you had a friend that's really into brewing. I mean,
Chef's got lean manufacturing covered.
It just all comes together.
Yeah, having that team. I mean, the team at home, Alana and I, and then the team here. It really makes it possible. And the guys have always been extremely understanding. At the end of the day, work has to get done, and I've got a job to do, but I think being a business owner, despite adding more work and adding more stress, also affords me a level of flexibility.
Yeah.
That makes it so that I can, some days I'll say, I'm going to come in at 4 in the morning. I got in early. I'm here by 6 most days. And I was like, well, I'm going to go in early today. Tomorrow I'm going to try to get here about 4:30 or 5 so that I can leave around 1 in the afternoon and get to the trails.
How close to the trails here? What do you run on in Muskegon?
About 20 minutes in either direction. So
Okay.
we've got the state park to the north, and then Hoffmaster State Park. So Muskegon State Park and Hoffmaster State Park. And I try to get to the trails as much as I can. That being said, during extremely busy times, I might be on the treadmill or just literally grabbing the bike trail right outside the brewery door, just because that's an extra 40 minutes of travel time to get to the trails.
What does your nutrition look like? I mean, do you take vitamins? Do you have a specific diet that you stick to?
Not really. I definitely take vitamins and supplements. During peak training, I hired a nutritionist while I was preparing for Margie, and so that did change, I guess I would say, the composition of what I was eating and the amount, really driving up the carbohydrates. I was hitting almost 800 grams of carbs in the weeks leading up to Margie per day, which is really difficult, actually. It's extremely difficult. But for the most part, we just try to eat fairly healthy. We're, I would say, veggie light. As long as bacon is salad, I could almost be vegan.
So I'm the exact opposite of you. We're vegetarians. The son's not, the kids aren't, but Betsy and I, we went through like a vegan stage, but we're more vegetarian now. There were some health reasons for that.
Sure.
I've talked about that enough on the podcast, but I always wonder, are you So, are you doing any kind of, what they would call like bro science when it comes to your health and well-being and preparation for any of these things, or just as a lifestyle?
To some extent, mostly with supplements. I just started using, what is it, currants. It's a black currant from New Zealand, or maybe it's Cura NZ. But I started using that based on some data that I saw.
What does that do, or what's it for?
It has been used for a couple of things. One is treating heart conditions, and there's a couple of studies out recently that indicate that it can help with oxygen absorption.
What's it called?
CURRA, capital N, capital Z. And I've been using that. It seems to speed up recovery time, and I'm not going to say it completely eliminates downs, but it really does seem to help. So I started that near the end of my training for Margie, and have been sticking to it. Beyond that, we don't fast. Maybe I naturally do to some extent just with my schedule, but we try to eat almost all home prepared meals. We eat out once a week, and focus on eating as much unprocessed whole foods.
Yep.
I just learned the term ingredient household. We're an ingredient household.
Yeah, it makes sense now.
Yeah.
There's a ton of information out there that says, you can do all the work you want in the gym, but your diet's got to be dialed.
Exactly. Yeah. So I keep an eye on macros. Really heavy on carbs, which came as a result of my nutritionist.
Yeah, my diet's super heavy on carbs just because being a vegetarian, but yeah, we're very much like whole food, plant-based kind of household.
Yep. Lentils, beans.
A lot of beans,
Oh, yeah.
heavy on the beans. The kids can't stand our home cooked meals, but we cook at home almost 100% of the time. I mean, we go out like maybe, with summer included, probably an average of 12 times a year. Yeah, we don't go out to eat.
Right.
But, I got all kinds of aches and pains, shoulder, back, knee. It's constant.
Yep.
It's like it's a constant trying to rehab something while you're training, and
Yep.
I feel like you're the same way in that your training is obviously it's year round, but it's a state of readiness. Like you're ready for the next race or almost ready for it, and that's kind of the. Do you do any lifting?
Not a whole lot of lifting, mostly body weight. I do have a bench at home that I rarely touch. To the extent that I'm using weights, it's normally to target one specific muscle.
Okay.
I've been doing pelvic thrusts the last few weeks just because I've been having some hip issues. And for a while, I don't know what any exercises are called, but for a while I was doing some leg lift with weights to bulk up my quads. Just because I want to have quads like Guillaume. Just amazing specimen. But other than that, it's almost all body weight or banded, just resistance bands.
What's your weight now?
149-ish.
I'm 212 this morning scale, and I've been anywhere between 212 and 220 pounds for the last decade.
Yeah.
And I'm really trying to cut that weight because I can feel it when I'm in a race. Like it's just so much on me. So I've implemented like a lot of more fasting now. I actually did like a 3-day water fast, which was amazing. I did that early this year, I think, and I keep telling myself I'm going to do it again. But day 3, it was the clearest I've ever felt mentally. It was crazy. And going to the bathroom for 3 days, like no problem.
Yeah.
And lost a bunch of weight. It was mostly water, and then slowly gained it back. But so that, and then just watching the caloric intake. And, I haven't really been running a ton. For some reason, out of all the 10 years that I've really been running hard, just this past 2 months, I got a shin splint. Like, where did that come from? You know what I mean? So I dialed down and just been hitting the stationary bike at home to keep my cardio up and walking on the treadmill or walking outside. But yeah, to get the weight down, because I do so badly want to run a 50K
Yep.
and then work my way up to a 50 miler. By the time I'm 50, which is only 3 years, almost 3.5 years away from now, I want to get 100 under my belt. And so that's what I'm getting at with you is it's like, okay, I've done the 5Ks, now I really want to try a 10K. And I do that, and I'm like, okay, that was really cool. I really want to try a half. So like, I got this feeling I'm not going to stop, and then my wife is going to say, now you're too old, stop it.
I don't know.
But I've seen dudes that are like, there was a guy last year, did you do North Country last year?
No.
Or this year, I guess still? In his 70s, and he ran, so on Saturday they do the 50 mile. So he just went ahead and did the 50 miler on Saturday, turned around and did it again on his own for the hell of it on Sunday. Absolute wild man. You know?
Yeah, you really don't age out of ultra running as early as you would think. I have been on course with many people much older than me who were just incredible athletes. And you look at them, they look just a normal person.
Yeah.
But a couple of years spent training the body and eating healthy, and they're still out there doing it. Harvey Lewis posts, I can't think of his friend's name, it might be Mike, posts pictures of his friend out running with him. I believe he's 103. And he's just out there getting it done.
That's a life goal right there. I mean, that's the part of the plan is to stay as healthy and strong for as long as possible. You know, got kids to raise,
Yeah.
friends to be around with.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
On the weight front, one thing that I've gotten used to is the fluctuations. So post Margie, it's hard to cut back the amount you're eating.
Sure.
And so I just know after a race, I'm going to gain weight. And I'm fine with that because it makes it a little bit easier once I hit that next big block. I don't have to ramp up my consumption because it gets to the point where I don't want to eat anymore, but I have to. So it's probably not the healthiest thing, but I never mind putting on 5-8 pounds in that kind of down period of 3 to 6 weeks where my running drops down. Because I know I'm going to be ramping back up, and I can just kind of maintain what is normal for me caloric intake. Because once I get into the thick of the next training block, I'm going to be counting macros in a way that is almost equally unfun or almost equally bad, making sure I get enough calories every day.
Do you use like an app, like a FitnessPal app or something like that track? Or
No, I did. When I first started running, I did because I was trying to get my macros under control, just cutting caloric intake. And eventually it became kind of second nature. Like I look at, we meal plan every Saturday, Sunday. And every night I look at our training plans for the week, I look at our schedules and plan out what we're going to eat. And then I'll look at the meals and say, okay, this is a little low on protein. Like, I don't know the exact macros in my head, but I can tell this is a little bit low on protein. What can we do to add protein in? Or, we've both got a huge weekend. We need more carbs on Wednesday.
Yeah.
That meal isn't going to cut it. All right, we're going to throw bread in just to make sure. That's really where I start to, for the most part, that's where I keep it. Now, once I get into the thick of training, I actually use a spreadsheet. Pretty spreadsheet oriented.
Makes sense.
And so, I'll use a spreadsheet just to start tracking to make sure that I'm getting the carbs and calories I need.
Let's touch on the Margie.
Yeah.
Can you explain that race and then get into you actually running that race? I always thought, again, like I'm just really dipping my toes into this ultra world. I just thought it was a bike race. I didn't realize that it had a running aspect to it. And this is the kind of race that you gotta find tokens and shit, stuff like that. I followed the bike race. I had some friends that were up there. I followed it online. First of all, the guy that developed the Margie, he's a really solid dude.
Awesome.
I like what he's doing with
Todd is an amazing person.
with the adventure club.
The 906.
The 906, that's really amazing stuff. And I really like his principles when it comes to developing young people and the reason behind 906. I did a whole podcast on 906 in the summer. they're trying to do one in Ludington, and I'm
Actually,
gonna.
kind of look like Todd.
But he just seems like a really genuinely solid dude, and I love the fact that hey, it's like you gotta hit X, Y, and Z, and if you show up at the finish line and you don't, no
it.
mas.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I ran the Margie 100 first, and that was that was my first official 100 miler. I had done a DNF Barkley before, but I don't really know where to even classify that. So, what would that have been, 22? Yeah, 22. I heard about this race, and I hadn't even heard of the bike race, but I heard about this race, and someone called it the Barkley of the Midwest, or the Barkley of Michigan. So it immediately piques my interest.
Sure.
I mean, it not even similar in a lot of ways, but the ethos had some similar vibes, and that got me really interested. Did a little more reading on it, and come to find out, it's a somewhat marked course. I mean, I would actually say it's fairly well marked, but the hidden tokens are kind of fun, and this whole idea that the race isn't providing aid. There may be aid on the course, there may not. You can bring crew, you might not. The crews that do come out are expected to support everyone, mutual aid, but there's nothing to be relied on. And that's really my style. I try not to use food from aid stations, partially food allergies, and partially just because I like to be self-sufficient. And so, reading about it, I went, this is an area I love to run. I've run a lot of these trails, and this whole ethos sounds great. I'm going to give it a shot. And so it was maybe 5 or 6 months after I had gone down to Tennessee and run what is allegedly the hardest race in the world. Run what is the hardest race in the world. I go up to Marquette to run Margie, and I don't know. It's man. I mean, you can't compare them side by side, but I would say that you can't hold a candle to Barkley in some ways, but in other ways, I expected it to be easy, and it wasn't. On paper, Margie looks easy. You're like, okay, it's 109 miles, I think it came out to that year. It was like, on paper, 15,000 feet of gain. I was like,
It's 100 miles. That's
this
not
is
really.
nothing.
Yeah.
No problem. Mind-blowing how difficult they make that race. The bike trails just beat the hell out of your legs. It's not a lot, but you're doing this nonstop. And the terrain is unforgiving, extremely technical in areas. And so I went out there with a friend, Nikki, who I met at my first HOTS. And we started together. She ended up having to drop out because she had, I don't remember what she had Moab coming up. And she wanted to save herself for 2 weeks later running Moab. She makes me look sane. But I set out and was able to finish the race. I ended up spraining my knee. I fell off a boulder at mile 67 or so, sprained my knee, and had to drag my leg behind me. Luckily, I had poles for the remaining 32 miles. So it took me way longer than I wanted it to. But I had a lot of fun. It was probably the best hallucinations I'd had in a race.
I wanted to talk about hallucinations.
I was with a guy who was, Justin was hallucinating animals. I'm hallucinating houses, which for some reason, I always hallucinate like physical structures. It's the weirdest thing. The 200, I'll talk about some of my hallucinations when I get to it. But, I'm like, do you see that house? No. Do you see the bear? No. All right, cool. Because he'd broken his foot, so we limped in together.
Jeez, Pete.
And, I got done, and I was like, I don't know if I'm going to do this exact race again, but I liked it. It was fun, and it was just ridiculously difficult. And I was able to mostly do it on my own. I brought a water filter, didn't have to use it. I managed to get water from people. And then I took a bagel and a beer from someone around mile 100, which I both hit the spot.
Probably.
That's how I got into it. And since then, I recommend that race to anyone who asks about 100. It's easily one of the hardest hundreds in the Midwest. And then I don't remember what time it was last year, but Todd, who he seems a lot snarkier online than he is in person, although he's pretty snarky in person too. He posted something on one of the Facebook pages that was like, ways not to get an entry into the Margie. Send an email to the race director and send an email to the race director and explain that you're a former champion and want a free entry. And I responded, being my snarky self, and said something like, "Well, what if you sprained your knee and managed to drag your leg in for 30 odd miles, and then you were offered a joint, but just this whole like snarky comment." And Todd shoots me an email and says, shot me a message and said, "Email me." I went, "Oh shit, what have I done?" Because they only do the 200 every 5 years. And so I emailed him, and he shot me an invite to the 200. Nice. So there were 8 of us that signed up. 6 of us ended up showing up on race day.
You mean
runners?
That's it.
Yeah. Yep.
Does he purposely keep it that low?
As far as I know, it was invite.
Sick. That right there just gives me goosebumps.
Yeah.
Like, oh, you want to be in that group so bad.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, it was so the 200 started on Wednesday, and we had to run the course in reverse, and that was unmarked, and then get to the starting line for the main race, turn around and run back. And it was kind of a change in my running occurred then. I brought on the nutritionist. I was training like hell. And one night, we had a Pigeon Hill event. This is probably in July. The race is in September. And we got done with the Pigeon Hill event. Alana and I may have gone to the local dive bar, and we get home, walked home. We get home, and she starts talking about training, and I'm not going to say lays into me, but lectures me a little bit about the fact that I trained to race, and then I raced to finish. And I hadn't really thought a whole lot about it, but looking back at my first,
this is good,
last annual Heart of the South, I went out there, and mind you, it was the first time I run nearly that far, so I was running to finish. But I joined up with a group of people and ran their race. And then the next time I ran Heart of the South, my best friend wanted to try it out, and so I ran with him. And he did a great job, finished, but it wasn't what I trained to do. We finished in, I think it was 9 days, and in the back of my head, I thought to myself a few times, if he drops, which I'm glad he didn't, if he listens to this, I'm glad he didn't drop, but if he drops, my goal is to put in the best negative splits this race has ever seen. So my friend Nikki had signed up to do the 200 with me, and Alana was basically just saying, "Hey, run your race. Nikki's awesome, and hopefully you two can run together, but don't just pair up with someone on the course and run their race. Actually, try to win." And I think I had this mental block where I was doing cool stuff, and that was enough. But I wasn't actually, I was pushing myself, but at the end of the day, I'm at the point where I know I can finish most races.
Yeah.
There are, backyards I'm not going to win, and then my big race, my A race, we'll see, someday maybe. But a race, 200 miles, I know I can finish it. And so I wasn't putting any pressure on myself. And after that conversation, I put a lot of thought into it for a couple of weeks, and finally decided that I wanted to hire a coach. And so I researched a couple of different coaches online and found Nicodemus De La Rosa, Nick Holland, who's a finisher of the Barkley Marathons. And I reached out to him. We ended up getting on the phone, had a great conversation, and I explained, partially I want someone to guide me in my training, and partially I think I need help getting over this mental block. At the end of the day, I was afraid of really putting myself out there. If I show up, I sign up, I show up, I finish. At a certain point, maybe that's not enough because I know I can finish, barring crazy injury. Maybe I need to put myself in a position to fail. And so, can I swear?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Nick and I had a couple, before the race, I brought him on. He had like 3 weeks to help me mentally prepare. And we had a couple of sessions where, we kind of dove into what I was afraid of, and it was failure. At the end of the day, I was terrified of failing. And, I wanted to push my limits, but only to the point where I didn't think I'd fail. And so he kind of challenged me to, as he put it, fuck around and find out.
Fuck around and find out.
And I put a lot of thought into that and finally decided that's, I'm going to risk a DNF. I'm going to go out there and I am going to risk not only failing at my goal, which is to place, field of 6 people, although one of the people I really wanted to race against couldn't make it. I want to place, and I was actually shooting for second place, maybe secretly in the back of my head first, but really I was like, I want second place. And that's one goal that I could fail at. And then there's the simple fact that when you go out trying to really race,
Yeah.
you're risking a lot. You're risking a DNF at the end of the day.
Yeah.
A lot more than you are when you're just going out to finish. And so that was the mindset I really started to work to get myself into. And from the mental standpoint, when I got there, I actually had it was right here, fuck around, find out.
I saw that.
Yeah, just as a reminder, like, this is what you're here for. You are here to find your limits. And I did, actually, during the race. I'm probably just going to kind of bounce around here, so you'll channel me in.
I do want to hear about this part, but I want to say that is super interesting in that I'm a finisher. I don't think I've ever, aside from not since I started running, have I ever said I'm going to win this 5K, I'm going to win this. I've placed in my age group. Mm-hmm. I've done first place in my age group.
Yep.
But I've never said to myself, oh, I'd really like to get first place overall. Sometimes I look at the field and say, I'm going for first place in my age group.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
But to actually say, I'm going to win this race, I don't think I've ever said that to myself. And I find it to be super motivating what you've just said. To like, what? Because I do follow people that are at a certain age, like my age or your age, that are like, fuck it, I'm going to try to win this.
Yeah.
And I never have said to myself or coached myself to a point where, why not?
Yeah. I mean, I've looked at fields of races mostly because I'm interested in, like, who's
going
running?
to be there?
Who am I going to see? But up until Margie, I had never looked at a field and gone, can I beat them? And I always said, I'm only competitive against myself. That's what I always told myself.
Yeah.
And I think to some extent that is true, but to some extent it was also my excuse.
Well, I also feel like a ton of people will say, just run your race. Just,
Yeah.
if your goal, you want to finish, just run that race and finish.
And especially when you get into ultra marathons, especially when you're starting in ultra marathons, at the end of the day, finishing should be the first goal. You are putting it all out there. You are finding out what your limits are.
But I think a lot of like Courtney, for example, we talked about Courtney Dweller at the beginning of this. I've read her words and heard her say on interviews or YouTube or whatever. If she gets to she can get to a point where she says to herself, at the very least, I'm going to make sure I finish.
Yeah.
Where she knows that, okay, maybe I can't win this thing, but at least I can finish, or I can get in the top 5 or something like that.
Right.
So, but the mindset's always, I signed up for this because I'm going to win it.
Right. And I mean, again, I think starting out, if you're just out there to find your limits, finish. Unless you're Courtney coming out and winning. Well, I don't think it was her first window; it was probably her second. But once you know you can do it, that's when if you're not pushing the envelope and setting the goals higher, are you really pushing yourself anymore?
Right.
Sure, you are, because it's hard. It doesn't get easy. But if there's not what is it that Laz says? Without a chance of failure, you can't succeed. And I think I never really made that leap up until Margie. I had one race in Arizona. I took second overall in a 50K. Or, I'm sorry, third overall in a 50K. I think Bronco Billy had like 40 minutes on me in first place. But I didn't go out to do that. It was like happenstance. It was happy happenstance. But looking back, it makes me wonder, what could I have done?
Yeah, to shave that time.
Could I have taken second? I don't know. And so looking forward, when I'm starting to contemplate what comes next, it's not just what's an extremely difficult race that I can finish. It's what's an extremely difficult race that I'll enjoy, maybe can do pretty well at.
Talk about the hallucinations at Margie.
Yeah. So this last Margie, the 200, I made it. I know my cutoff with no sleep is around 30 hours, just from HOTS. I can normally get about 30 hours with zero sleep whatsoever before I hallucinate at all. And historically, I've only gotten to the point where I have the peripheral hallucinations, and mostly active versus you see something on the trail that looks like a snake, but it's because it's a stick. Generally, having houses in my periphery, whatever reason, and seeing a snake that's a stick is about as far as it goes. And then I'll be like, all right, it's time to take a nap. With Margie, I'm trying to think. I started hallucinating maybe 45, 50 hours into the race, but not bad. And then I did take a nap, which helped clear that up. And then the last day, I spent probably about 12 hours hallucinating. And it was a pretty cool experience, actually. I mean, it's like this mix of cabins, and then, here's this mid-century modern house, all in the periphery. Like you turn to look at it and it's gone.
That's wild.
There was one skyscraper. I don't know, whatever it is about my brain loves to see structures. And so I've started hallucinating, but I can't remember if I was in the lead yet when I started or not. But at a certain point, I'm in the lead. And I start to think, man, maybe I can actually win this thing. And I know that if I don't sleep, it's going to get worse. But I also want to fuck around and find out, because I don't know where my limits are yet.
Yeah.
I want to know where my limits are. And so I got to, it was right around mile 26, mile 27. I laid down, took a nap, or I laid down to take a nap. I told my crew, give me 10 minutes. And I thought it had been like 8 or 9 minutes. I was still awake. I jumped up and said, I'm taking off. Like, I'm not going to sleep. I'm not asleep yet. I'm just going to go, and we'll see what happens. Probably cost me the race. It had actually been about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes. My sense of time was just distorted. And so I took off and made it a couple of miles before the peripheral hallucination started to creep in front of me. It's pitch black, I'm in the woods, and I can't tell what's real anymore. And so I was like, all right, I have to sleep. Like, I can't see, I don't know where the trail is. I'm running along, fairly steep drops. We're at a point where I can't anymore. And so I grabbed a space blanket, wrapped myself up, and laid in the middle of the trail. The idea being that if Aaron caught up to me, he'd kick me and wake me up, and I could chase him. Well, I sat there for 30, 40 minutes shivering, because I'm soaking wet.
Yeah.
I don't have better layers with me, which is my fault, oversight. And the space blanket's just not enough. So I'm literally just shivering against rocks on the trail trying to sleep. It doesn't work. So I get up, try to go forward, and I'm like, this isn't working. It's not working. I called Alana. I was hallucinating where the roads were at. I was pretty delirious at this point. And she's like, just stay on the trail. Stay on the trail. So I said, all right, I'm just going to lay here. So I just sat there and shivered until Aaron finally caught up with me. And He
You were
helped me.
way ahead, dude.
He helped me get to. We bounced back and forth for a lot of that race. And awesome guy, by the way, really awesome guy. Could have just run past me. Instead, he stopped, helped me. He thought I was a deer, but helped me get to Alana. She wasn't even that far away. And then I laid down and took like a 20-minute nap and made it. I think I took one more like 1-minute nap before the end, because at that point I just pushed myself too far. But and at a certain point I also knew that it was hopeless. I wasn't going to catch back up to him. He'd really kicked it into high gear, and as fast as I was moving, I was gaining like a quarter mile and between seeing crew. I was like, I just can't do this. So I slowed down and took another nap. But yeah, good hallucinations.
What do you think it is in people like yourself and other ultra runners that are continually trying to, like you said, test your limits?
Oh man. Well, I think that's what appealed to me when I saw The Race That Eats Its Young. Is, I'm not going to say I've lived an easy life, but I've lived a fairly easy life. And I've really pushed my brain. Law school, business ownership, all of that. But I'd never pushed my body. And it made me wonder, what are the limits of my body? And then once I got into ultra running, I started to realize it's not just the body, it's also the mind. It's just this desire to know, I think. This desire to find out what I'm actually made of. What can I do? And I keep discovering the body is this amazing machine. It's capable of so much more than we think it is. And being able to find those things and then use them, it's exciting.
It is really exciting. I've got so many questions. I'll try not to keep it too
you're
long.
good.
but-
I mean, yeah, you're totally good. As long as I'm on the trails in about an hour and 45 minutes.
What do you listen to when you're out there? Do you, do you typically listen to something when you're training, and do you race with nothing? Or?
Training, a mix. So, yeah, really just a mix. Sometimes I will run in complete silence, just so I can, especially if I've got something that I want to work through, whether it be, maybe I'm having a bad day and I just kind of need to work through some shit in my head. Then I'll run in silence. Sometimes I'm trying to think of a marketing plan. I do plenty of work while I'm running. Forget half of it by the time I'm done, but then I'll be in silence. A lot of times audiobooks. Some
same.
podcasts. I'm trying to get more into podcasts while I run, and so far I've struggled. And then a pretty wild mix of music. I have a couple of different playlists that I'll listen to. So if I'm doing more upbeat or more tempo, then I'm definitely going to have a playlist on of music, which will range from everything. It'll be hip hop, Panic at the Disco, Electric Callboy, which is a German EDM band, and I listen to. They're actually my most listened band this year according to Spotify because of Margie. I had them on repeat for probably like 12 hours. At a certain point it's background noise, but it's just very up-tempo. During races, it really depends. Some races you can't have headphones or you can't have the distractions. If you're running in the woods down in Tennessee, searching for books, one, you can't have it, and two, you don't want it. If I'm out knocking out, let's say hots, well, if I need to be wary of traffic because you are on a road, then no music. But, in the middle of the night at Margie, I'm bored. I'm just trying to keep moving. I haven't seen anyone in 4 hours. I'm going to put music in.
Yeah, I'm more of a book or podcast guy. I don't really listen to any music, but you were talking about tempo there. I'm interested on like how you parse your training for like zone 2 or speed work or anything like that. One thing I fail at is doing like the speed work and stuff like that. I'm like one of the, I just love that zone 2. You just get into a groove and go all day. And I always say to myself, well, if I can do this all day, I can run a race. Because that's all I'm doing is trying to stay in a good zone the whole time. But I know that speed work's important. I just never do it. And one of my goals for this coming years to focus on the speed work?
Yeah. Historically, up until hiring Nick, I would do 1 day of speed work every week except during recovery weeks, and that would be hill threshold repeats. So on Wednesdays, I always run from Pigeon Hill with the run group, before the run group, but I would, I start out here, I go to Coles Hill, which is only like 30 feet tall, and I would basically dead ass sprint. And it would be anywhere from, it would be a series of repeats, anywhere from a couple of minutes to 10-minute blocks, and then rinse and repeat. That was all I was doing up until hiring Nick. Now we're starting to integrate a lot more speed work. Unfortunately, I did injure my soleus because my body wasn't used to that much speed work. So getting into it slowly is a good thing. But, I would say most of my training is still zone 2, but trying to get at least 2 days of speed work is certainly beneficial. And one thing that I learned early on after bringing on Nick is that I wasn't always relying on heart rate. Sometimes I also rely on rate of perceived exertion. And I might have been dialing it back more than I needed to. Cruise control at, say, a 9-minute pace, when realistically, I can put cruise control at 8:20, 8:30, and it's really not that much worse. So that's something that I've had to kind of adjust to. I can run all day at a 9, but I can also do it at a faster pace.
I know that there were topics that you didn't want to touch on. I'm just going to ask a question. Are you training for anything or getting ready to train for anything?
I am, yeah. I'm training for Black Canyon 100K. So Alana and I are moving, temporarily relocating to Tucson. We're going to go down there for about a month. And that was partially because we like sun. We're working remotely. And then partially because we don't have mountains here to train in. So when we head down there, she signed us both up for the 100K. It'll be her first. And I'm really excited for that. And then after that, there's a reason I want to train in the mountains.
Roger that.
Yep. There's a reason that I'm knocking out crazy miles and on the treadmill. Thank God for a 40%
you're one of those guys.
treadmill.
You're one of those guys on Strava that when I in the morning, one of the things I do is just part of my morning routine is I pass out as many kudos as possible. Yeah. And I'm like, this guy is insane. When you texted me the other day and you were like, yeah, I'm going to do whatever, how many miles outside, and then you're hitting the treadmill for 10 more. I'm like, this is a wild man.
Not having the hills here, we bought one of those incline treadmills back in 2020. And so that's how I get my climbing in. And I'll tell you what, it's come in handy.
I bet.
But yeah, I hopefully spend some time down south, and that's kind of like that one race I just need. I want to say I need to get over, but I don't know that I'll ever get over it. There's something about the Barkley that just drags you in, and if I can perform well enough, then I can move on to the other things I want to do.
So obviously you've met a ton of people in this community, in the trail running community, ultra trail running community. What do your text message, emails, and DMs look like from these people? I'm sure it's like, hey, are you coming to this race? Are you going to do this race?
That's one of my favorite things about the running community as a whole, but especially the racing that I do, there is this sense of community for starters, and then with some of these bigger races, you just get to meet the coolest people from around the world.
Yeah.
Pyotr Chadovich, he and I have been talking about doing a 24-hour race, which I have no desire to do. But now I may end up signing up for a 24-hour race because he sent me a link and said, I just signed up. Oh, come on, man. And then, my friend Nikki from Alabama, from Alabama, she invited me out to pace her at Cocodona last year, a 250-miler across Arizona. And you get to do these incredible things, and then just catch up. The other day I was messaging a buddy that lives in England about being down in the woods in Tennessee, and it's like I'm just randomly messaging people around the world. I've got friends in Japan. I've got a lot of friends in Canada, all because of races.
Yeah, that's pretty sick.
It's awesome, honestly. It's great to have these shared experiences. You know, whatever the big race is,
Yeah.
it's not at all like being in the military together, but it's the same idea of these forged bonds,
Sure.
forged under duress.
Everybody wants everybody to do well.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
be safe and not get hurt and have fun. And
Yeah.
the community aspect of it is one of the things that really keeps me drawn in. I've made so many friends and built businesses out of it because, these people want to do fun, crazy, wild shit together. Mm-hmm. And we go on, my buddies and I, my partners in the racing company, and we take at least one trip a year where we, adventure the hell out of it. And
We all egg each other on too.
yeah, and we all egg each other on. Exactly. I guess the segue from the racing stuff, real quick. Any big plans for Pigeon Hill? Maybe other communities, tasting rooms, anything like that?
No, definitely not that. Whew, 2 is enough. Between here and sociable, that's plenty.
The original OG was a ton of fun.
It was.
It was a real cool. I mean, the first time going in there does Brendan still work at the law firm or no?
He switched law firms.
Did he?
Yep.
Well, I mean, obviously, he helped me get my
Yeah,
liquor
yeah.
license, but yeah, we met down there one time and went to the brewery, got pizza from across the hall,
Yeah.
and brought it over. Real,
Yeah.
definitely. We're bootstrapping the hell out of this, and
We did too. Still do most of the time. I would say the biggest things that we've got coming are a couple of major shakeups to our core lineup. I'm not announcing those yet, but we've got 2 major changes to our core lineup, which will be the biggest that we've had. And I kind of alluded to one earlier, being looking into the low alc.
yeah,
Which, I mean, I think for me personally is I'm just really excited about it because I love to drink beer. And, sometimes I'm like, well, I guess I'm just going to have an NA because I really don't need to have a beer, or I
Right.
don't need another beer. So I'll grab an NA, but the ability to session drink with something that doesn't actually get you drunk, really, really fun. And it makes the experience better.
I hear you.
And
There's
it's
nothing.
healthier.
It's healthier. Well, I mean, hops in general are really healthy for you, but as well as I do, and probably a bunch of people that are going to watch and listen to this, when you're done with a race or you're done with even a training session with your friends, or you're mountain biking or bike riding, a big thing for me is the gravel bike riding part of my life. That whole community really loves to smash beers.
Yep.
And when you're done, yeah, you want to have a beer, but you don't want to have, shifting sands, like
Right.
6 of them.
Yep. Yep.
You want to be able to session and enjoy yourself and not get drunk, and that's what NA beers though. Just Athletic does a really good
They
job.
do. Just the Haze is great from Sam, but it's not quite the same. And for me, even with racing, if I'm doing a backyard, beginning in the 6th hour, I'm allowed to have 3 ounces of beer. Every time I come, I'm not getting drunk off 3 ounces
Right.
of beer. But it's something I can look forward to when I
Right.
get back to camp. It's a reason to keep going. Although, if I just stopped, I could have more. But having a product that you don't really have to think about the alcohol content, especially if you're worried about dehydration, is really nice.
Yeah.
And even at Margie, I think I had 2 beers while I was on course. No, I didn't actually finish either of them, but it's something that I can look forward to. It's a treat. It's
You ever
carbs.
watched any of the old footage from the Tour de France from back in the 50s and 60s? You should YouTube that. It's amazing. You'll see these riders on during the race. They'll pull over in one of the little villages or whatever, and they'll raid the grocery store or whatever. But they're going in and they're grabbing bottles, big bottles of beer and baguettes, and they're stuffing the beers in the back of their running jerseys or their racing
Yeah.
jerseys, and taking the baguettes and breaking them in half and put them in there. And you see them riding on the road, and they're cracking the beer bottles while they're in the race, and they're passing it. because back then it was like, well, what do we do for the pain of this race?
Absolutely.
They're not all dialed like it is today. It's some funny shit. You should check it out.
That's awesome. I mean, even Camille may not be the most liked on social media right now, but Camille, I remember early on, I think it may have been when she was setting one of her records. She was on a track, and you see her grab a can of beer, and she's literally setting world records.
Yeah.
Grabbing a can of beer, you do have nutrition value, and then there is certainly pain management and also increasing appetite. Not the only substance that will help with those things.
I feel you there.
Yeah.
Every now and then a run. For me, I don't know if we're talking about the same thing, but a little 5 or 10.
Oh yeah, we're
Milli.
talking about the same thing.
Yeah. It really sets the tone for that long run.
Yep. I call them magic pills. I've got a little pill form. 2.5 for me. I'm a micro guy, but I tell you what,
Yeah.
it can take a bad run and make it okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Michael, I think this is a great interview. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. Thanks for being gracious enough for letting us come down here and hang out in the
Thanks for
brewery
making the trip.
and do this. I'm going to be following your journey on Facebook and Strava. And best of luck to you and all the things that you're doing. I look up to you as a runner, as an athlete in this community, and you're really helping me shape what I'm going to do next. So I really appreciate it, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
you.
Thank you.